Now, when you look at these names, realize that, especially in biblical times, they name their kids for reasons. I mean, their names have meanings. In other words, Esau comes out red and hairy, so they named him Red and Hairy. That's what Esau means. Jacob comes out holding his heel, so they named him Heel Grabber. That's what Jacob means. And I credit this to Dr. Chuck Missler. He's the one that did. I saw something he did talking about the pre-flood patriarchs and the meaning of their names, and you see them right there, Adam through Noah, and on the right side here is what their names mean, and putting them together in the order that you see right there as a sentence. Chuck Missler said, it says, "Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching, that his death shall bring the despairing rest." Well, that's the plan of the whole Bible right there in the names of the first 10 patriarchs. And as you start looking at the last few, well, it makes sense. He was named shall come down, or descended is another way you can look at Jared's name. That's the time when the watchers came down, according to the book of Enoch. And Enoch, son of Jared, apparently his destiny was to be a teacher, because he spent most of his life talking against or teaching against the activity of the watchers. And Methuselah, the connotation of his name, his death shall bring, is that judgment is coming, because 7 days before the flood, Methuselah died. So actually you had a wedding and a funeral on the same day. Methuselah died and the 3 sons got married 7 days before the flood. Judgment is coming. With his death comes judgment. 7 days later, boom, the windows of heaven are opened, the fountains of great deep broken up, and you got the flood, judgment. And of course, if you know that that's what's coming, then it makes sense. You end up naming your kid Despairing. And also, Lamech was born during the time of the first generation Titan Clash of the Titans. So, a lot of chaos going on there. It makes sense that you name your kid Despairing. Noah, on the other hand, was born after the first generation Nephilim Titans were killed off at the end of the 500-year time period, which was 700 years before the flood. So about 100 years later, Noah's born, and his daddy takes a deep breath and names him Rest. So very interesting. Well, I decided to take the same idea of applying looking up the names of the people in Genesis 10. And when I did that, oh boy, I found some interesting stuff. Now, Shem and Japheth, if you look up their names and their sons' names, they're pretty normal. But when you look up the names of Ham and his children, this is what you end up with. These are all the names given in Genesis chapter 10, verses 6 through 20. And you got people named like Terror and Anguish and Firebrand and Blades and Terror and Gnawing and Thorns and Enclosure of Wrath. I mean, whoa. What was going on with these kids that you name your kid Enclosure of Wrath? I mean, what possesses a parent to look at their newborn kid and say, Enclosure of Wrath? What do you think, honey? No, Terror. I mean, look at them. I mean, seriously, why do you name your kid something like this unless there's something clearly wrong with them? And stringing their names together, just like Chuck Missler did, this is the paragraph that you end up with. All I did is take the meaning of their names, put them in the same order that they're given, and you end up with this paragraph. He raged, a black terror, double straight afflicted trafficker. Black terror, drink thou anguish, compass the chamber. Thunder, compass the smiting. He who is coming, their love, we shall rebel. A double straight firebrand travailing, affliction of water. Blades opening the moistened morsel. Forgiven ones bowing to spy. A trafficker hunting terrors, trodden downstairs, the strangers draw near. Showers of life, gnawing like thorns, they shall break loose. Double woolen enclosures of wrath. I don't know, call me crazy, but that's a pretty wild family tree you got going on there. I think something's clearly up with them, if you ask me. And in fact, I think the Bible tells you exactly where the post-flood Nephilim come from in Numbers 13, 27 through 33, when it says, all the people we saw there are of great size. Yeah, they saw giants there. We saw the Nephilim there. And then parenthetically, it says the descendants of Anak, the Anakim, come from the Nephilim. Okay, and I've heard a lot of Nephilim researchers say that the Nephilim were sterile. Well, that refutes that right there. the Anakim are the sons of Anak, who himself is the son of Arba, who is an Amorite, son of Amorius, son of Canaan, son of Ham, who stepped off the ark, with no mention of angels anywhere in the picture. Numbers 13, and there's one of my friends out there that's a prominent Nephilim researcher. He likes to show multiple versions of this scripture on the screen when he does his Nephilim 101 talk, showing different English translations. And while he's reading each of the different translations, he's completely missing the fact that this says they are Nephilim that came from Nephilim. They are giants that came from giants, not giants that came from angels. These are Nephilim from Nephilim. 5th grade reading level English. And we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. And there's another guy out there, Dr. Michael Heiser, who, for whatever reason, still also leans toward the multiple incursion theory that angels continue to mate with women. Although, in one of his lectures, he admits that there's really no reason to think that way.
We saw the Nephilim, ha-Nephilim there. The Anakites are from the Nephilim. This phrase, from the Nephilim, is min ha-Nephilim. You'll notice there's no yod here. You have the same word spelled two different ways. I think the reason why this is done here is because this is the way it's spelled in Genesis 6. The writer wants to link these Nephilim after the flood with the ones before the flood. And if that's the case, if the Anakim came from, in other words, were related to the Nephilim from before the flood, you don't need the continual cohabitation. You have a genetic relationship intact, so to speak.
You do indeed have a genetic relationship intact, so to speak. That genetic relationship goes directly to the sons of Noah. And I'm just going to say right here that this next scripture I'm about to put on the screen is the smoking gun that absolutely, positively obliterates any notion of another incursion. Right here, it's Genesis chapter 9, verses 18 and 19, where it says, the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Oh, why is he calling attention here? Ham was the father of Canaan. Who are the Nephilim that are consistently being wiped out? This is where you got to understand what God's doing right here. Because throughout the Old Testament, God would tell the Israelites, you know what, you could go to war with this group over here, and you know, you can take the women and the animals and children as spoils of war. However, when you go over here, you got to kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals, wipe out everything. So at this point, you have a choice. Either God is schizophrenic and into random acts of genocide because he's apparently prejudiced or something, or there's a legitimate reason why the standard rules of war applied with this group over here, but on this group over here, you got to wipe out everything. And I'm going to submit to you, based on the text itself, that everywhere you see him saying utterly destroy, those are the ites of Genesis chapter 10, verses 6 through 20. And if you don't believe me, just go look it up. Go look up all the times where he's throughout the Torah and the book of Joshua, where they had all these campaigns and they utterly destroyed the various ites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, etc., Amorites. Those are the ites of Genesis 10, 6 through 20 that go directly back to these three guys right here. And they are Canaanites. And right here, Moses, the same guy who wrote Genesis chapter 6, is writing 3 chapters later, Genesis chapter 9, and he says, Ham is the father of Canaan. No angels mentioned here. And then to elaborate on that, the next verse says, these three were the sons of Noah. And from these, the whole earth was populated. This is written about 850 years after the flood. Okay? Moses is writing this about 850 years after the flood. Same guy writing Genesis 9 wrote Genesis 6 and the phrase and also after that. So if he meant to imply in Genesis 6:4 that after that is in a post-flood context, this was the perfect time to elaborate on it and say, oh, by the way, these are the three sons of Noah, and the whole world was populated through them except for all those giants over there. The Anakim, they were populated by another incursion of angels. He doesn't say that. He says the whole population of the earth at 850 years after the flood at that time came from these three guys right there. And the Table of Nations proves it. And every single reference in the Bible to giants being utterly destroyed by the Israelites go back to these people with no mention of angels anywhere in the picture. So if you haven't figured it out, I totally and completely reject the multiple incursions idea as completely eisegetical. Eisegesis is where you insert your own ideas into the text because the text doesn't support that idea at all. When you look in the text, you see the three sons, Japheth, Ham, Shem. I got them listed here this way. The sons of Ham are Canaan, Mitzrayim, Put, and Cush. There are many giants listed in the line of Canaan. Who's the father of Canaan? Genesis 9:18. Ham was the father of Canaan. Okay. In Mitzrayim's line, there's one giant. We'll talk about that in a minute. At least one giant. Put, there are no giants that I'm aware of in Put's lineage. And there's one giant in Cush's lineage, which is Nimrod, but he wasn't born that way. And I've talked about this in other sessions, so I won't really go into that here. But he became a giant. I don't believe he was born that way. The Amorites are mentioned over 80 times in the scriptures. 80 times. Over 80 times the Amorites are mentioned. And Amos 2 tells you Amorites are as tall as cedar trees. Who was the father of the Amorites? Canaan. Who is the father of Canaan? Ham. No angel. In Mitzrayim's line, you have the Philistines. The Philistines are mentioned over 200 times in the scriptures. And we know of at least about 4 or 5 giants, right? That were among the Philistines. Goliath, his brothers, and these are characters that are born to the giant in Gash. Maybe he's an unnamed giant we don't know about. 6 fingers, 6 toes, you know, the whole 9 yards. They come from Caphtor. Caphtor was a son of Mitzrayim. Now, what's interesting about Caphtor, and your King James gets it wrong, actually. If you compare translations of Genesis 10, where it talks about the sons of Mitzrayim, it leads you to believe that Cashluhim is the father of the Philistines. But the King James contradicts itself in Jeremiah 47:4 and Amos 9:7, 2 confirming witnesses showing that the Philistines came from Caphtor, not Cashluhim, his brother. Other translations get it right. New Living gets it right, and a few others. So the Philistines come from Caphtor, as verified in Jeremiah 47:4 and Amos 9:7. What's interesting about Caphtor is that he settled the island of Crete. Well, Crete is where all of Greek mythology, or as my friend who grew up in Greece would tell me, Greek history, originates. The Greek gods originate in Crete. Who settled Crete? Caphtor, son of Mitzrayim, son of Ham, who stepped off the ark. No mention of angels anywhere. So if you want to figure out where the great men of renown that showed up in the ancient post-flood world, who became later known as Greek gods, that's where you go. The Bible just told you exactly where they came from. And I used to think that the only evidence of giants were in the offspring of Ham, because that's all I could find in the scriptures. However, when I started looking into history, I found, nope, he's not alone. There are no giants in Shem's line, but there are some giants in Japheth's line. And you can look this up for yourself. Go look up Gog and Magog. Just Google them. You'll find that throughout the ancient historical record, they were recognized and understood to be giants. In fact, even to this day, there's a parade that takes place in the UK called the Lord Mayor Parade. Well, it's interesting. The Lord Mayor Parade was founded by King John Lackland, a signer of the Magna Carta, who, incidentally, all of our presidents, some would say all except for Martin Van Buren, but I remember reading somewhere that there is apparently a loose connection that Martin Van Buren may also be related to King John Lackland. But whatever the case, at least 43 of our 44 presidents are all related not only to each other, but to one guy, King John Lackland, which should tell you, how meaningless your votes are. Again, don't believe me, go look it up for yourself. We are all related.com, and plenty of other sources out there will tell you the same thing. So all of our presidents are related to this one guy, and this one guy creates a parade that to this day, they are still honoring Nephilim giants in the streets of the UK. These are the giants Gog and Magog. And when I was a missionary and was in China in 2006, I spent some time in Singapore and Beijing and Wuhan. And during my time in China, I was privileged to go to the Great Wall of China. It's really quite an amazing sight. What an amazing experience to be there. But I came to understand that the Great Wall of China was originally apparently known as the ramparts of Gog and Magog. Now, if you see, there's me standing there, but if you see all these little dots right here on top of the wall, those are people. Okay, that shows you how big this wall is. That's a little bit overkill if you're just trying to keep out 6-foot tall invaders. And I think they're to keep out the hordes of Gog and Magog, who apparently, according to historical records, were giants. And if that's the case, then this commercial may be more true than we realize.
Huh. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Everybody knows that.
Well, did you know the Great Wall of China wasn't always so great?
What should we do?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
I about fell out of my chair when I saw that commercial. I'm like, yes, even Geico gets it. Of course, the church is still arguing about the Sethite theory and angels mating with women. But anyway, when you look in these ancient cultures, you see depictions like this. They're in Asia too. I mean, it's not just giant depictions in the land of Canaan or the land of Egypt. They're all over the place. There's one in Asia right here. Now, it's just like the Great Wall of China. See all these little dots? These are people. Look how big that statue is. Some would say this is just made in honor of somebody with a tremendous ego. Okay, maybe. Or it could be a life-size representation made by people who are that big. And maybe these guys are later generations or a little smaller. And all these little people look at that and say, wow, isn't that neat? What if it's representing something real that existed in the ancient past? I'm going to suggest that it does.